Hello everyone, we're going to talk today about a few of the other toys within the Kinetics module and how to make some of the settings, because otherwise it'll drive you a bit nuts. Some of them are intuitive, some of them are not. So let's put a couple boxes on the screen. We'll use boxes because they have nice pointy edges and it gives you a good idea of exactly how they're spinning when they're spinning. I'm going to turn on kinematics mode. In the last video I showed you how we can add a motor by pressing the motor icon when we have a chain selected, and if we push stop to reset, you can see we now have that motor icon in there, and we have a motor on that shape. It may not spin it because the default motor doesn't have much power, so if I hit play you'll see it still responds to gravity. So let's turn off gravity by selecting group properties and unchecking the box that says responds to gravity on pivot. This doesn't affect system gravity, it only affects the gravity that makes this object rotate due to an off-center mass. So if we hit reset and play, the motor now takes effect. It's not a very strong motor. I can pull against it. I can even give it a reverse momentum and the motor eventually reasserts itself. You can up the power as high as you wish. If you up it too high, you won't be able to drag and pull it back. Sometimes that may be important, sometimes it may not. But there's another type of motor you can use. Let's delete this one by hitting the motor icon and selecting delete. And now let's select both objects and hit the motor icon. The difference here is that the motor, you can now see we have a half a ring of motor icon on this shape and the other half of the ring is on the other shape. This means the motor is now being shared between the two shapes. Now this doesn't stop you from moving the shapes. They can even be on top of one another, but take note, if they're on top of one another they would collide with each other, so you would have to set them to the same group number in order for that not to happen. So let's turn this back on and hit play and see what we get. Now you can see that one motor seems to be really fighting and the other motor, gravity, is still affecting, which is screwing things up. So let's turn off gravity on the pivot on that second item, hit reset and go, and now you'll see the motor affects both objects. They still do collide, so one object can hit the other and this can cause a jam up. But if I hold one object steady, you'll see the other motor begins to get force applied to it because all the force of the motor is now on the other object. If I let it go, the force is now split between the two objects. This may or may not affect their momentum at the moment because the angular momentum is a case of accumulated force. So if we set both of these objects to the same group number, the same group object to 1, if you're non-zero, two group objects will not hit each other if they're the same number. So these are both number 1, so they should no longer hit each other and they'll just pass through. Doesn't seem to be the case. They're hitting each other. Let's see if we can see why. I'm going to select them both. And the reason why is I set them to 1, but I didn't use update all. So as we click through the list, we can see that rectangle 1 is group 1, rectangle 0 is still group 0. So we'll go back up to rectangle 1, group 1, and hit update all. When you hit update all, it now goes to both objects, or all objects, and we should be safe now to rotate, and they shouldn't hit each other. But I didn't push reset. Press reset and go, and now they go right through each other. So this shows the importance of hitting reset after doing a setting and how to create two objects that do not collide. As I said, you can grab the objects as long as you turn off kinematics mode, put them on top of each other, offset to each other, whichever you like, and hit play and get them to go. Now because one affects the other, because the amount of force transferred is supposed to be equal between the two, you can grab one, pull it, and the two of them will react, and it looks very much like a kinetic piece of art that you want to experiment with its veins. So that's how to use a motor. It can be used on a single object or share itself between two objects, and you can have as many motors as you like with very few limitations, but you shouldn't put more than one motor on one object, although I suppose it can be done.